I still remember the way the air smelled that Tuesday morning. It was late October, the kind of crisp, sharp Ohio autumn where the leaves look like they're burning on the branches before they finally drop. Marcus had left for his quarterly conference in Chicago at 5 in the morning, groggily kissing my forehead before dragging his Samsonite suitcase down our hardwood hallway. He hates flying, so he'd opted for the 6-hour drive, promising to call me when he pulled into the downtown Marriott. I stayed in bed for an hour after the garage door slammed shut, watching the pale morning light creep across our bedroom ceiling, listening to the rhythmic, heavy breathing of Buster, our 3-year-old golden retriever, curled up at the foot of the bed. It felt like a normal, quiet, slightly boring Tuesday. I had a mountain of spreadsheets to tackle for my remote marketing job, a fridge full of meal prep chicken, and a quiet house to myself for 4 whole days. I remember feeling a slight sense of relief, the kind you get when you love your husband, but just want to wear your oldest sweatpants, eat cereal for dinner, and not talk to another human being for 72 hours. By noon, the quiet felt a little too heavy. The house we bought in the suburbs of Columbus is beautiful, but it's big, and when Marcus isn't there, every little creak of the floorboards sounds amplified. Buster was uncharacteristically restless, too. Normally, he's a living rug, content to sleep through my Zoom calls, but that afternoon, he kept pacing between my home office and the front window, letting out these low, anxious whines that pricked at my nerves. I figured he just missed Marcus. Marcus is the fun parent. He's the one who takes Buster on 3-mile trail runs and lets him sneak pieces of bacon from the breakfast plate. I was just the one who scheduled the vet appointments and made sure he didn't eat chocolate wrapper remnants off the sidewalk. Around 3 o'clock, I finally closed my laptop, frustrated by my lack of productivity, and decided a long walk through the neighborhood might clear both of our heads. The air outside was freezing, cutting right through my oversized gray hoodie. Buster immediately pulled at the leash, his nose glued to the damp pavement, tracking scents with a desperate kind of urgency. We walked our usual 2-mile loop through the subdivision, past the identical manicured lawns and the skeletons of inflatable Halloween decorations sitting deflated on front porches. On the way back, as we neared our driveway, Buster suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His ears went up, his tail went stiff as a board, and his entire body froze, staring intently at our neighbor's driveway 2 houses down. Sitting there was a beat-up midnight blue Honda Civic with a dented passenger door. My heart did a weird, erratic flutter in my chest before I could even process why. That car belonged to Chloe. Chloe had been my absolute best friend since our freshman year at Ohio State. We were the classic case of opposites attracting. I was the organized, slightly neurotic planner, and she was the chaotic, magnetic whirlwind who lived life like she was constantly running out of time. She'd been living in an apartment downtown, but 3 months ago, her landlord had abruptly raised the rent by 40%, forcing her out. She was broke, crying on my kitchen island, and completely overwhelmed. Marcus had been the one to suggest it. He'd looked at her tear-stained face, patted her shoulder, and said, "Chloe, don't be ridiculous. We have a fully finished basement with its own bathroom. Stay with us until you get on your feet. It'll be like a permanent sleepover for you and Lily." I'd hesitated at first, fearing the strain it might put on our marriage, but Marcus had insisted, pointing out that she was family. And for 3 months, it worked. She became a fixture in our lives, eating dinner with us, watching Netflix on our couch, and playing with Buster. But 3 weeks ago, she'd suddenly announced she found a cheap studio apartment near the Short North District and packed her things in a single weekend. The transition had felt abrupt, almost cold, and since she left, her texts had been brief, evasive, and rare. I thought I'd done something to offend her. Seeing her car parked outside our neighbor's house instead of our own driveway made 0 sense. Our neighbor, Dave, was a retired 60-something accountant who spent all his time golfing or visiting his grandkids in Florida. I knew for a fact Dave was in Boca Raton for the month. So why was Chloe's car parked there? I pulled Buster toward the Civic, my brow furrowed in confusion. I peered through the driver's side window. The interior was messy, littered with empty Starbucks cups and old clothes. But what caught my eye was a set of keys sitting in the cup holder. They weren't Chloe's usual keys. Attached to the ring was a heavy brass carabiner with a miniature leather football charm. My breath hitched. That was Marcus's spare key ring, the one he kept hidden in the fake rock by our water spigot in the backyard in case we ever locked ourselves out. A cold, heavy knot began to form in the pit of my stomach, expanding until it felt like I'd swallowed a block of ice. My brain tried desperately to rationalize it. Maybe Marcus had lent her the keys before he left. Maybe she needed to borrow something from our garage. But if that were true, why park 2 houses down? Why hide the car? Why hadn't she texted me to say she was coming over? Buster was whining louder now, his nose pressed against the Civic's tire, his tail giving a hesitant, confused wag. He knew the car. He knew the scent. I stood there on the asphalt, the wind whipping my hair across my face, feeling a sudden, terrifying sense of alienation from my own life. I looked up at my house. It sat there, quiet and imposing, the dark brick looking gloomy under the gray afternoon sky. The blinds to the master bedroom were drawn tight, exactly how I'd left them that morning. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing looked wrong. Yet every instinct in my body was screaming at me that the foundation of my existence was shifting beneath my feet. I walked back to our house in a daze, my boots clicking loudly on the concrete. When I unlocked the front door, the silence inside felt different. It didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, like a suffocating blanket. Buster immediately ran to the back door, scratching at the glass to be let out into the yard. I let him out, watching him through the window as he darted straight for the bushes, near the foundation where the fake rock was kept. He sniffed at the dirt frantically, his paws digging at the mulch. I walked out after him, the cold air biting at my bare ankles. I reached down, picked up the hollow plastic rock, and flipped it over. The sliding plastic door on the bottom was loose. The compartment was empty. My hands started to shake. I stood up, looking around our empty, fenced-in backyard, as if the answers were written on the wooden panels. Marcus was supposed to be in Indiana by now, past the state line, driving toward the Windy City. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped it onto the grass. I clicked on Marcus's name and hit call. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4 times.
Every ring felt like a hammer striking my chest. Finally, it went to voicemail. "Hey, this is Marcus. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I hung up without leaving a word. Then I texted him. "Hey babe, just checking in. You make it to Chicago yet?" I waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. I went back inside, sitting on the edge of the kitchen island, staring at the screen until the light dimmed and went black. Buster came back inside, refusing to leave my side, leaning his heavy head against my knee, his dark eyes filled with an unspoken anxiety that mirrored my own. The silence of the house was deafening now. Every clock seemed to take louder, counting down to a moment I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed, vibrating against the quartz countertop with a sharp, aggressive noise that made me jump. It was a text from Marcus. "Hey, sorry. Traffic on I-65 was an absolute nightmare. Just checked into the hotel and heading down to the conference mixer now. Love you. Talk tonight." I stared at the glowing blue bubbles on the screen. The text was classic Marcus, energetic, casual, reassuring. But as I looked at it, the image of that midnight blue Honda Civic, parked 2 houses down in a dead man's driveway, flashed in my mind. The leather football charm, the empty plastic rock in the mulch. My stomach turned violently, a wave of nausea hitting me so hard I had to grip the edge of the sink. He was lying. Or she was lying.
Or they were both locking me out of a reality that was happening right under my nose. I looked at Buster, who was staring up at me, his ears flat against his head, giving a low, mournful bark that echoed through the empty kitchen. I sat on the kitchen floor for what felt like hours, my back pressed against the cold lower cabinets, staring at Marcus's text until the screen went dark again. Buster curled up next to me, resting his chin heavily on my thigh, occasionally letting out a deep, shuddering sigh. My mind was spinning out of control, constructing a dozen different scenarios, each one more agonizing than the last. Maybe Chloe had just stolen the keys. Maybe she was going through a mental health crisis and had targeted our house. I tried desperately to grasp at any straw that didn't involve my husband of 4 years completely destroying our life together. But deep down, in that primal, visceral place where women just know, I knew exactly what was happening. The way Chloe had suddenly moved out without warning. The way Marcus had grown increasingly distant over the last month, buried in his phone, laughing at texts he wouldn't share, claiming it was just work stress. It all started connecting like pieces of a sickening puzzle. I looked down at Buster. "What did you see, boy?" I whispered, my voice cracking in the quiet room. He just blinked at me, his brown eyes full of an ancient, heavy sadness. Animals don't know how to lie. They only know what they feel, And Buster had been terrified of our own home all afternoon. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, and made a decision. I couldn't just sit here and wait to be made a fool. I needed to know. I crept up the stairs, my boots making agonizingly loud thuds on the carpet, even though I knew the house was supposedly empty. I went into our master bedroom. It smelled like Marcus's cologne, a woody, clean scent that usually brought me immense comfort. Today, it made me choke. I walked over to his side of the bed and opened his nightstand drawer. It was mostly empty, just some charging cables, a half-used pack of mints, and a paperback thriller he'd been reading. Then I checked the closet. His laundry hamper was empty. He'd taken everything for the trip. Then I noticed the master bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and when I pushed it open, a faint, sweet scent hit me. It wasn't my shampoo, and it definitely wasn't Marcus's body wash. It was vanilla and coconut. It was the exact body spray Chloe bought in bulk from Bath & Body Works. I walked over to the trash can under the sink. It had been emptied before Marcus left, but lying right at the bottom was a single crumpled up piece of Neutrogena makeup remover wipe. I don't use Neutrogena. My skin reacts to it instantly. Chloe used them religiously. A cold sweat broke out across my neck. They hadn't just been careless. They had been arrogant. They thought they had 4 whole days. They thought I'd be sitting at my desk downstairs, oblivious, while they used my home, my sanctuary, as their playground. Marcus hadn't driven to Chicago at 5 in the morning. He'd probably driven a mile down the road, waited for me to settle into my morning routine, and then Chloe had come over. But wait, if they were together, where were they now? The house was empty. The car was down the street. I walked over to the bedroom window that overlooked the backyard. From this angle, I could see past our privacy fence into the detached garage at the back of the property. We rarely used the garage for cars. It was mostly filled with Marcus's power tools, old lawnmowers, and boxes of holiday decorations. But Marcus had spent the last 2 weekends cleaning it out, putting up heavy blackout curtains over the small square windows so he could work on his carpentry projects without the neighbors staring. My eyes locked onto the garage door. There was a tiny sliver of light escaping from the bottom edge, casting a faint golden line onto the damp concrete of the driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently I thought it would crack. They weren't gone. They were out there, right now, in the space where my husband built me a custom coffee table for our anniversary. I grabbed my phone, slipped my shoes off so I could move silently, and crept downstairs. Buster tried to follow me, but I firmly pointed at his dog bed. "Stay," I mouthed, my lips trembling. He sat down instantly, whining softly, his tail giving one weak thump against the floorboards. I stepped out of the back door into the freezing night air, wearing nothing but my socks and my hoodie. The grass was wet with dew, soaking through my socks instantly, sending a shock of cold at my spine, but I barely felt it. Adrenaline was a raging fire in my veins. I walked along the edge of the fence, keeping to the shadows, using the large oak tree in our yard as cover. The closer I got to the garage, the louder the noise became. It wasn't the sound of power tools. It was music. Low, muffled indie pop music, the kind of playlist Chloe always listened to when she was cooking. I reached the side door of the garage. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press them against the damp siding to steady myself. The small window next to the door was covered from the inside with a thick, dark blanket, but they hadn't taped down the very top corner. If I stood on my tiptoes on top of the old overturned milk crate sitting by the bushes, I could see inside. I swallowed the massive lump in my throat, closed my eyes for a brief second to pray for strength, and then stepped up onto the crate. The view inside the garage shattered my life into a million jagged pieces. Marcus had set up his large camping air mattress in the center of the room, surrounded by string lights he'd taken from our Christmas boxes. There was an open bottle of the expensive Pinot Noir we'd saved for our upcoming anniversary sitting on a cardboard box. And there they were. Marcus was sitting on the edge of the mattress, his head buried in his hands, wearing the gray flannel shirt I'd bought him for his birthday. Chloe was kneeling in front of him, her hands resting gently on his knees, looking up at him with an expression of intense, desperate devotion that she had never once shown to anyone else. "I can't keep doing this, Chloe." Marcus's voice cut through the small gap in the window frame. It was muffled, but I could hear every single syllable clearly in the quiet night. "Lily is going to figure it out. She's smart. She's already asking why you moved out so fast." "She doesn't know anything, Mark," Chloe replied, her voice soft, dripping with a sickening sweetness that made my stomach heave. She reached up, running her fingers through his dark hair, a gesture I had done 1,000 times. "She thinks we're just drifting apart. If we stick to the plan, by New Year's, you can tell her you want a divorce naturally. We just have to survive a few more months." "It's killing me," Marcus groaned, leaning forward, resting his forehead against her shoulder. "Looking her in the eye every day, pretending I'm driving to conferences just so we can spend a weekend in a damn garage because we have nowhere else to go. I love you, Chloe, but this is sick."
"It's not sick. It's just the cost of us being together," she whispered, pulling his face up to kiss him. I watched my husband, the man who had promised to cherish me in front of everyone we knew, wrap his arms around my best friend and pull her down onto that mattress. I stepped off the milk crate, my foot slipping in the mud, causing a loud squelch. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, terrified they'd heard me, but the music inside kept playing, and the shadows against the blanket didn't shift. I walked back toward the house in a trance, the freezing mud squeezing between my toes, completely numb to the world. I let myself back into the kitchen, locked the door behind me, and collapsed against the island. Buster immediately came over, licking the tears that were now streaming down my face in a silent, burning torrent. They thought they had 4 days. They thought they had time to play house in my backyard while I wept over a fake text message. A dark, cold rage, sharper than any knife, completely replaced the sorrow in my chest. They wanted a narrative. They wanted a plan. I was about to give them one they would never forget. I stood in the center of my dark kitchen, the silence of the house no longer suffocating, but empowering. The tears had dried on my cheeks, leaving a tight, stiff sensation that felt like armor. I looked down at my feet, covered in cold black garden mud, and then looked at Buster.
He was watching me intently, his ears perked up, waiting for my next move. He knew the energy in the house had shifted from despair to absolute, calculating resolve. They wanted to use my home, my trust, and my dog to build a secret life together. They thought they were the authors of this story, keeping me in the dark until they were ready to discard me like an old piece of furniture. But they had forgotten whose house this actually was. My grandfather used to tell me that anger is a wildfire, but strategic anger is a laser. I needed to be a laser. I walked upstairs to the guest bathroom, washed the mud from my feet, and put on a fresh pair of thick wool socks and my heavy winter boots. I didn't turn on any lights. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam pointed strictly at the floor. I went into Marcus's home office, the small spare room down the hall that he kept meticulously organized. I opened his filing cabinet and pulled out the heavy accordion folder containing our important documents. I sat at his desk and pulled out the deed to the house. My father had lent us the down payment, and because of that, my name was listed first on every legal document, including the mortgage. The house belonged to me in ways Marcus always conveniently forgot. Then I found the paperwork for his pride and joy, the pristine, restored 1969 Chevrolet Camaro, sitting in the secondary bay of our driveway under a heavy weatherproof tarp. He'd poured $30,000 of his own savings into that car, savings he'd hidden from our joint account before we married. The title was in his name, but the insurance policy was tied to our household bundle. I took photos of every single document with my phone, uploading them directly to a secure cloud drive. Then I opened my laptop and logged into our shared bank accounts. My hands were perfectly steady now. I transferred exactly half of our combined savings into a new private checking account I'd opened 6 months ago when I first started feeling the emotional distance between us. I left enough for the mortgage payment to clear next week, but not a single penny more. Next came the most crucial part of the plan, the narrative. If I confronted them right now, yelling and screaming in the mud outside the garage, it would be messy. It would give them a chance to make excuses, to gaslight me, to pack their things and leave together, comforting each other in some cheap motel while I was left holding the broken pieces. No. They wanted a secret weekend. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. I was going to let them marinate in their own deception until the trap snapped shut. I sat on the living room sofa, pulling Buster up next to me, wrapping my arms around his thick neck. "We're leaving for a bit, buddy," I whispered into his soft fur. He nudged my chin with his wet nose, a quiet reassurance that he was ready for whatever came next. I packed a large suitcase. I packed my clothes, my passport, my grandmother's jewelry, and all of Buster's food and favorite toys. I loaded the suitcase into the trunk of my SUV, which was parked out front on the street. I'd intentionally avoided parking in the driveway when I came home early, a stroke of luck that I kept my presence hidden. Before I left, I walked into the master bedroom one last time. I took the crumpled Neutrogena makeup wipe out of the bathroom trash can and placed it gently in a clear Ziploc bag. I took a photo of it resting on Marcus's pillow, the white cotton stark against the dark navy pillowcase. Then I pulled up my text thread with Marcus. I typed out a message, making sure my tone was completely normal, matching the oblivious wife persona he expected. "Hey babe, that's crazy about the traffic on I-65. Glad you made it safely. Hey, my sister just called me from Cincinnati. She's having a total plumbing emergency at her house and needs me to come help her with the kids and the contractors. I'm packing up Buster and driving down tonight so she's not alone. I'll probably be there until Sunday afternoon. Have a great time at the conference. Love you." I hit send. I stood by the front door, watching the screen. 2 minutes later, the 3 little dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. He was calculating. He was realizing that the coast wasn't just clear for a few hours in a dark garage. The entire house was now theirs for the next 3 days. His reply came through, practically vibrating with hidden excitement. "Oh wow, that's terrible about her house. Yes, absolutely go help her. Give her and the kids my love. Drive safe, honey. Let me know when you get there. I'll just be trapped in these boring seminars anyway. Miss you." I let out a cold, breathless laugh that sounded entirely foreign to my own ears. Miss you. The man was currently sitting on an air mattress 20 yards away, breathing the scent of my best friend, telling me he missed me. I grabbed my keys, hooked Buster to his leash, and walked out the front door, locking it securely behind me. I drove 45 minutes north to a boutique hotel downtown, checking in under my maiden name. I ordered a massive room service pizza, fed Buster a handful of pepperoni, and sat on the king-sized bed with my laptop. I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the entire night researching top-tier divorce attorneys in the Columbus area, specifically looking for the most ruthless, aggressive lawyers specializing in asset protection and marital misconduct. By 4 a.m., I had sent consultation requests to 3 different firms, attaching the photos of the financial documents and the screenshot of Marcus's text message alongside the timestamps of my early arrival. But the legal battle was only half of the equation. The real retribution required visual confirmation. They thought they were safe in that house. They thought the walls could keep their secret. On Wednesday morning, while they were likely waking up in my bed, eating my food, and laughing about how easy it was to fool me, I placed an order on Amazon for same-day delivery to a locker near my hotel. 3 miniature, high-definition, motion-activated security cameras disguised as standard USB wall chargers. They connected to cellular data, meaning they didn't need to be hooked up to our home Wi-Fi network to stream live video to my phone. On Thursday evening, knowing from Marcus's past routine that he always took Chloe out to a specific dimly lit diner on the edge of town around 7 p.m. to avoid being seen by anyone we knew, I drove back to our neighborhood. I parked 3 streets over and walked through the wooded trail that bordered the back of our subdivision, entering my own backyard through the loose picket in the fence. The house was dark. The Honda Civic was gone from Dave's driveway, likely tucked into our own garage now that the coast was clear. I used my house key, slipping inside like a ghost. The air inside smelt strongly of Chloe's perfume and a cheap grocery store scented candle. They had been living here, in my space, completely unbothered. I moved quickly, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hands remained steady. I plugged the first camera into the outlet directly facing the living room sofa. I plugged the second one into the wall beneath the television in our master bedroom. The third one went into the kitchen outlet, hidden behind the coffee maker, angled perfectly toward the island where we'd spent so many mornings together as a married couple. I tested the feeds on my phone. The images were crystal clear, the night vision capability turning the dark rooms into sharp, eerie shades of green. I slipped back out the rear door, locking it behind me, and melted back into the shadows of the woods. As I walked back to my car, the cold wind biting at my cheeks, a terrifying sense of anticipation washed over me. The stage was set, the actors were returning to the theater, and I was about to watch the ultimate betrayal stream live to the palm of my hand. By Friday morning, the trap was fully operational. I sat in my hotel room, a lukewarm cup of black coffee in my hand, staring at my phone as the live feeds from my house flared to life. Around 10 o'clock, the kitchen camera picked up movement. Marcus walked into the frame, wearing nothing but his gray sweatpants, his hair messy from sleep. A second later, Chloe stepped into view. She was wearing my favorite oversized Columbus Crew soccer jersey, the one Marcus had bought me at our first game together. Seeing her in my clothes, pouring coffee into my mugs, sent a violent jolt of electricity straight to my chest. They were laughing, talking softly, moving around my kitchen with a casual domesticity that made me want to scream. I leaned closer to the screen, adjusting the volume on my phone. "I still can't believe she actually went to Cincinnati," Chloe said, leaning against the counter, taking a sip from her mug. "She's usually so observant. I was terrified she'd notice something before I moved my stuff out." Marcus walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face in her neck. "Lily trusts me, Chloe. That's her flaw. She thinks everyone has the same rigid moral code she does. But honestly, this weekend has been perfect. No looking over my shoulder, no rushing out to the garage in the freezing cold. It feels like this is how it's supposed to be." "It is how it's supposed to be," Chloe whispered, turning around in his embrace to kiss him. "Just a few more months, Mark. Then we don't have to hide anymore." Hearing him call my trust a flaw shattered the last remaining fragment of my old self. The woman who used to worry about pleasing him, the woman who kept the house clean and made sure his favorite meals were ready after a long workday, was officially dead. In her place stood someone cold, calculated, and entirely dangerous to his existence. I closed the app, took a deep breath, and dialed the number for the law firm I had hired the previous afternoon. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah, who specialized in high-asset divorces, answered on the second ring. "Lily, I've reviewed the financial disclosures and the text records you sent over. You have an incredibly strong case for marital misconduct and asset dissipation, especially since he lied about the business trip to facilitate the affair in your marital home. What's our next move?" "I want the paperwork filed today, Sarah," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I want him served at the house, tomorrow morning, Saturday at 9 a.m., and I want an emergency injunction to lock him out of our joint lines of credit immediately." "Consider it done," Sarah replied. "I'll have a private process server at your residence tomorrow morning sharp. Are you going to be there?" "No," I said, looking out the hotel window at the gray city skyline. "I'm going to let him enjoy his last night of paradise." That Friday evening, I watched the cameras one final time. They had moved to the living room, opening a bottle of wine, watching a movie on the couch where Marcus and I used to cuddle on weekends. They looked so comfortable, so secure in their stolen happiness. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I just felt the cold, clinical anticipation of a scientist watching an experiment reach its inevitable conclusion. On Saturday morning, I woke up early. I dressed in a sharp, tailored black trench coat, put on my boots, and loaded Buster into the back of my SUV. We drove back to the suburbs, but I didn't pull into our street. I parked at the entrance of the subdivision, sitting in the driver's seat with my phone mounted on the dashboard, the live feed of the front porch streaming in real time. At exactly 8:58 a.m., a plain white sedan pulled up to our curb. A tall man in a dark suit got out, holding a thick manila envelope. He walked up our concrete steps and pressed the doorbell. Through the living room camera, I saw Marcus freeze. He was sitting at the kitchen island, eating a bagel. Chloe was upstairs in the shower. He frowned, looking at his watch, clearly not expecting anyone. He walked to the front door and pulled it open. "Marcus Vance," the man in the suit asked, his voice carrying clearly through the porch camera microphone. "Yeah, can I help you?" Marcus asked, his tone guarded. "You've been served," the man said smoothly, thrusting the heavy manila envelope into Marcus's hands. "Have a nice day." Marcus stood on the porch for a long, agonizing moment, staring down at the papers. I watched his face turn from confusion to complete pale horror as his eyes scanned the bold lettering at the top of the page, "Petition for Divorce and Dissolution of Marriage." He slammed the front door and stumbled back into the living room, his hands shaking violently as he ripped the envelope open. Pages of documents spilled onto the coffee table. Included in the packet were high-resolution screenshots of his text messages, the bank transfer receipts showing his emptied savings account, and, most devastatingly,
printed color photographs of the Neutrogena makeup wipe resting on his pillow. "Chloe!" Marcus screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, desperate panic. "Chloe, get down here right now!" The bathroom door upstairs opened, and Chloe ran down the steps, wrapped in one of my plush white bath towels. "What? What's wrong? Why are you screaming?" "She knows," Marcus gasped, dropping to his knees on the hardwood floor, his face buried in his hands just like he had done in the garage. "She knows everything, Chloe. Look at this. The bank accounts are drained. She has a lawyer. She has photos from inside the house." Chloe snatched the papers from the table, her face draining of all color as she read through the terms. The petition demanded full ownership of the house, the liquidation of his beloved 1969 Camaro to cover legal fees, and a permanent restraining order removing him from the property effective immediately. "How?" Chloe whispered, her hands trembling as she looked around the living room, her eyes darting past the very outlet where my hidden camera was plugged in. "How could she know? She was in Cincinnati." "She wasn't in Cincinnati," Marcus yelled, standing up, his chest heaving as anger took over his panic. "She set us up. She trapped us."
Right on cue, as the chaos in my living room reached a fever pitch, I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus's number. It rang once before he snatched it off the counter, pressing it to his ear with a desperate, breathless gasp. Lily, oh my God, please listen to me," he sobbed into the receiver. "It's not what it looks like. I can explain everything. Chloe was just staying here because—" "Save it, Marcus," I interrupted, my voice smooth, quiet, and deadlier than any scream could ever be. "I'm outside." I put the SUV in drive and turned the corner onto our street. I pulled into the driveway, stopping right behind his covered Camaro. I turned off the engine, stepped out of the car, and walked up the front steps with Buster walking proudly by my side. I didn't use my key. I just stood on the porch, waiting. The front door flew open. Marcus stood there, looking absolutely haggard, his eyes red and swollen. Behind him, Chloe was peeking out from the hallway, still wrapped in my towel, looking like a drowned rat. "Lily, please," Marcus begged, reaching his hands out toward me. "Don't do this. We can talk. We can go to counseling. I made a mistake, a horrible, stupid mistake, but I love you." I looked at him, then I looked past his shoulder at Chloe, who couldn't even meet my gaze. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sorrow, no regret. Just a profound sense of clean, clinical closure. "You didn't make a mistake, Marcus. You made a choice," I said, my voice echoing in the crisp morning air. "And you made it in my house, on my bed, with my best friend. You told her my trust was a flaw, but you forgot that trust isn't weakness. It's just a door. And when you break it, I lock it from the other side." I reached into my pocket, pulled out a second legal document my process server had handed me, and laid it gently on the porch railing. "This is an emergency eviction and temporary protection order. You have exactly 20 minutes to pack whatever can fit into a single duffel bag and get out of my sight. Chloe, you can leave in the towel for all I care. But if either of you are still on my property when the clock strikes 9:30, the Columbus Police Department will be here to remove you for trespassing." Marcus looked at the paper, then looked at Buster, who let out a sharp, authoritative bark, stepping between me and my husband. Buster knew exactly who belonged in this house, and it wasn't Marcus anymore. "Lily, where am I supposed to go?" Marcus whispered, his voice completely broken. "The bank accounts are frozen. I don't have anywhere to go." "I hear the garage has great acoustics this time of year," I said, offering him a cold, tight smile. "You two can figure it out together. After all, you have the rest of your lives now." I stepped past him into my foyer, unhooked Buster's leash, and closed the heavy front door behind me, locking the deadbolt with a sharp, definitive click. Through the frosted glass, I watched their shadows linger on the porch for a few seconds before they finally turned around, defeated, broken, and completely ruined, walking down the steps into the cold autumn air. I walked into my kitchen, poured myself a fresh glass of water, and looked out the window. My life as I knew it was completely over, but as I looked down at Buster, who was contentedly wagging his tail by the island, I knew the next chapter was going to be entirely mine.